This is actually take 2. There was just a power outage in the area that is supposedly over. But if this goes out again, I will not try right now. I'll come back to this later. But I am going to try to record this at this point a second time. The title of this week's talk is Why Do Leaders Sometimes Fail Us? So on the face of things, the answer is so simple. Our leaders are human, no less human than any of us, and no more godly than any of us, right? So why and how do they attain their position? Are all those who attain leadership positions necessarily fit for these, whether attained by inheritance, election, appointment, or mandate? As we look around our world, we are daily bombarded by abuses of power by too many leaders, including those much closer to home than we are comfortable admitting. Let us think about this. Both the burden of leadership and the expectations of leaders, and why too many go way off the intended path of leadership. Let us consider a few teachings about leadership and the humanity we are all to maintain from our Gemara. We will learn a bit from the Babylonian Talmud, Masechet Kiddushim 31a through 32b, in which we find it an extended discussion about the honor due to one's parents, one's teachers, one's leaders, and of course God, who is the one to whom all must give honor. Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi says, it is prohibited for a person to walk even 4 cubits with an upright posture. Koma zekufa means unbent posture, or haughty posture, if you will, which is considered an arrogant manner. As it is stated, the entire world is full of God's glory. One who walks in an arrogant manner indicates a lack of regard for this glory and honor of God that is surrounding him, and thereby chases God from that place. The Gemara relates, Rav Huna, son of Rav Yoshua, would not walk 4 cubits without an uncovered head. He said, the divine presence is above my head. Shechina lamala meroshi, and I must therefore act respectfully. So how do we walk? How do we exhibit and take on the qualities of haughtiness? This is not about slouching and not maintaining good posture, but rather about how we regard and engage with each other, as we are all to give honor to God first, and not just presume that we ourselves are worthy of such honor. Humility is an important, if not the most important quality discussed when regarding leadership. This is an repeated notion in our Jewish sources. Think of Moshe, with whom Ribbon Shalom had the most intimate of relationships, precisely because he was the most humble of all people. And only then can God speak with him face to face, panim al panim, as we read in last week's Parshat, or in a few weeks ago. So we read, Ha'ish Moshe ani ma'od mikol adam asher al pnei adama. Yes, it was last week. This man was exceedingly humble, more so than any person on the face of the earth. With him, pe el pe adaber bo, I speak face to face, mouth to mouth, not in a vision, not in riddles. I speak to Moshe directly. This was directed at Miriam and then at Aharon, with whom he aligned himself, supposedly as they publicly reamed Moshe out. Now we go to another teaching from this section of Kiddushim. Ula the Great interpreted a verse homiletically at the entrance to the house of the Nasi. What is the meaning of, all the kings of the earth shall give you thanks, O Lord, for they have heard your words of your mouth. Yuducha Hashem kol melchei aretz ki shamu imrei ficha. The word of your mouth, it's the singular. The words of your mouth are the plural. This is referring to when the Holy One, blessed be God, said, I am the Lord your God. And then in the same verse says, you shall have no other gods before me, the beginning of the 10 Commandments, as we know. The nations of the world said, God teaches this for God's own honor. for both statements entail respect for God. Rabbi Tzadok then says to them, for how long will you ignore the honor due to God, due to the omnipresent, and deal with the honor of people? The Holy One, blessed be God, makes the winds blow, raises the clouds, brings the rain, causes the earth to sprout, and sets a table before each and every creature. Therefore, every Nasi, every leader, is required, first and foremost, to give honor to God before he himself is worthy of any. Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Yes, we are to honor each other. We are to honor ourselves. And we are to honor those with whom we have contact, for all are created by God. And we must honor God above all others. The notion presented in the lengthy Talmudic discussion, from which I just took little bits, is that if we follow this order of giving honor to our Creator, to our parents, to our teachers, and to others, we will build a proper society. In order to give honor to others, one must recognize some sense of humility that enables them to give that honor. Within this discussion, a clear distinction is made between honor and fear and awe. Honor builds a trusting and positive society. Awe for God is necessary, but fear of other people being destructive is counterproductive. Now, how does this apply to the incident for which our Parsha is named? Let us look specifically at Sefer Bamidbar, Prakim Yud Gimel 13 through the beginning of 14, and consider what goes off the rails. God speaks to Moshe. Send for yourself, Shelach, Lecha, send for your own benefit these people, these scouts who will scout the land of Canaan, to which I am giving to the children of Israel, to whom I am giving this. You shall send one leader for each tribe. Each one shall be a chieftain in their midst. So one of the questions of the Midrash Tanchuma is, why is this section dealing with the Meraglim so close to the section dealing with Miriam? Because she was punished for the deed of slander against her brother. And these people who had been there did not learn their lesson and will slander what they saw in terms of the land. Now, Rashi also says, when it says Shalach Machat, send for yourself, because when this section is repeated in Devarim, in Deuteronomy, the question is, who sends? Does God send these? Does Moshe send the scouts? Do the people? So Rashi says, I'm not commanding you, but if you wish, you may send them. Since the Israelites had come and said, let us send men ahead of us, and this is a reference to Devarim, Batik Ravun Elai Kulachem, and they said, send people. So God says, you know what? They want to send scouts, send the scouts. So Moshe sends them. All of them were men of distinction. We read, Kulam Anashim Rashi B'nei Yisrael. In other words, they were not the losers. They were not just Poloni Ben Poloni, anybody. These were leaders. And they should have known better. They should have known that people will follow their words, that people will listen to them, that people will put a lot on their experience. At this point, the names of the scouts are given. It's important to note that this is not provided when the story is repeated in Devarim. Perhaps, the commentators tell us, to save face for what went so wrong. Because again, you've got 12 people, 12 men of distinction. Moshe sends them, tells them which way to go this way in the south, climb the mountain, look and see what kind of land it is. Or itam et haaretz mahi, et ha'am hayoshev aleha, chazak hu harafeh, hama'at hu imrav. Who are the people who inhabit it? Are they strong or are they weak? Are there few or are there many? And what of the land that they inhabit? Hatovahi imra'ah, is it good or is it bad? And the cities, are they camps that are open or fortresses that are closed? And what is the soil like? Is it fat and lean? In other words, they are given a checklist of all the things to look for when they go to this land. They go up, they see what they see, and as they are traveling, they come to the valley of Eshcol. They see a branch with a cluster of grapes. They carry it on a pole between two people. We've all seen that picture of the man on this side and the man on this side with the pole and the grapes. It's used in some wineries as an advertisement for their spirits. Rashi and others teach that the fruit was so large that they needed to use support when they carried it. They carried it as far as they needed. They returned from scouting the land at the end of 40 days. So again, we see this 40 days, which is a repeated theme often in our texts. We are aware of that. And here we are. These 40 days are always a period of time that is substantial and of meaning, of import. We see this often in our text as a type of refrain. 40 days, a long time. 40 days Moshe was on the mountain. 40 years, 40 days, the flood. 40 years in the desert, that. They come to Moshe and Aharon and all of the congregation, and they say to them as follows. Verse 27. Banu el ha'aretz asher shalachtanu, v'gam zavat chalav advash hi v'zeh pirya. Efes ki ad ha'am hayoshev be'aretz u'v'ha'arim b'tzarot gedolot ma'od, v'gam yodei ha'anak ra'inu sham. We came to the land to which you sent us, and it was flowing with milk and honey and its fruit. Ephes. Now, what does that Ephes mean? Your English translations often will say, however, indicating causative. But here, we have to ask, is Ephes a pause? Ephes in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, means zero, nothing. It is as nothing. Because the people who inhabit the land are mighty, and the cities are large. They're fortified. And we even saw the offspring of giants. The Amalekites were in the south. So notice what the Meraglim do. Yes, all the things that Moshe told us to check out. The checklist. The fruit is good. The land is good. The soil is good. All of that. But it's all is nothing. Because we saw these giants. They are mighty. Their cities are fortified instead of indicating security. That's, they can come out and do whatever they want. We saw the offspring of giants. And who's in the south? Their well-known enemy, the Amalekites. At this point, Caleb silences the people and says, you're saying it's impossible. You as leaders are discouraging the people. We cannot have that. Vayahas Caleb et ha'am el Moshe. He silenced the people to listen to Moshe, Vayomer, and he says, we can go up and take possession of it. We can overcome these obstacles. We can go. We should go. But the men who went up with him said, Lo nuchal la'alot el ha'am ki chazak hu memenu. We cannot go up to that nation, for they are stronger than us. Now, Rashi points out something here in terms of amplifying the wrongdoing of these particular leaders. Mimenu in Hebrew means both from us, in comparison to us, and also in comparison to him. So who would the him here be? God. In Sota 35a, it says that what they are saying is that even God cannot help us. These people are greater than God. Not acceptable. In verse 32, we read, Vayotzi dibat ha'aretz asher taru ota al b'nei Israel. So they then spread this evil report, dibat ha'aretz, telling the children of Israel, the land is too big, it consumes its inhabitants. V'ra'inu b'tocho anshe midot. We saw very, very large people. We saw giants, the son of Anak. And then this great line, V'nihi be'einenu kechagavim v'gam hayinu be'einehem. We felt like grasshoppers. We were these tiny little creatures. And if this is how we felt ourselves, then certainly that's what they saw. Sota says in the Gemara, in discussing this text, 35a, V'chein hayinu beinehem, it says, Shamanu amrim zeh lazeh. We heard them talking to each other and saying, there's ants in the vineyard who look like people. Of course, in chapter 14, the entire community raises their voices and shouted. They wept that night, and the children of Israel complained against Moshe v'Yelinu al Moshe v'al Aaron, kol b'nei Yisrael, and they said, if only we had died in the land of Egypt, if only we had died in this desert. Why are we suffering more? Why does God bring us to this land to fall by our sword? Why will we be subjected to these giants, to these challenges? It would have been better if we had died. So what do they say in verse 4 of chapter 14? Let's choose a leader and return to Egypt. Our sages look at this, Nikna Rosh, as a term referring to idolatry. Rashi says, according to the Targum, let us appoint a king that will take us and help us go back to Egypt. At this point, Vayipol Moshe v'Aharon al panehem lifnei kol kahal adat b'nei Yisrael. Moshe and Aharon fall on their faces before the entire congregation of the children of Israel. So here we see a complete undoing of the people. Fear takes over. Awe, kavod, honor are all gone. Fear takes over on the part of the leaders who were respected, who one would hope there would be kavod for, and awe. Then the community itself dissolves into complaints and chaos. Moshe and Aharon are despondent, and all that has been achieved up to this point seems lost and undone. The blessings of the land and the fruit it produces are ignored. The size of the people nourished by the land is feared. Enemies are invoked. And the leaders, instead of leading the way to the land they are promised, facilitate the implosion of the community at this time, so it would seem. And these leaders, let us remember, are the important and respected representatives of their respective tribes or shvatim. This is what's so upsetting. They are named for honor here, and then they don't show this honor of God and devolve into fear as the narrative continues. And then when the whole event is retold in Devarim, as they did not show themselves worthy of this honor, we are told by our Mefarshim they are not named. In our accompanying Haftarah, we refer to the words of Yoshua that reminds the Bnei Yisrael of the intended blessings of the land. Yoshua sends 2 scouts to check the land, and they end up in the care of Rachav. Rachav is a very interesting person. We will see her yet again. She comes from a background that's of interest. She herself runs an inn, some say a house of ill repute. I wasn't there, I don't know. But it is through the mouth of this non-Jew, taken by many to be a member of the oldest professional guild of women that existed, and we all know what that is, that we are reminded of what this land is, that the leaders are to embrace and shepherd the people towards. In other words, she's going to give the report that the scouts should have given. They're asleep. People are coming to hurt the scouts that are staying with her, and she says to the men, look, I know that God has given you this land. Yadati ki natan Hashem lachem et haaretz v'chi nafla eimatchem aleinu. And that we are fearful of you, and that all of the inhabitants of the land have melted away because of you. Very different read, right, on those big, scary guys. For we have heard how God dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, what you did to the kings of the Amorites on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you completely destroyed. And as soon as we heard all this, our hearts melted. Nor did there remain any spirit in any man because of you. For Hashem Elokeichem hu Elohim b'shamayim v'al ha'aretz mitachat. The Lord your God is the Lord above and below. Now, compare this as a type of refrain to Yitro, who also hears and responds with absolute respect and honor to God who saved this people. Ata ani yadati, he says in Shemot. Now I know that your God, granted, he's aware of other gods, is the most powerful of all other gods. He blesses God. He offers sacrifices. So we have Yitro and we have Rachav telling us this, giving us this perspective from the outside. And then we have the Meraglim, the respected, honored leaders, and their reaction. Rachav then continues and says, now, I pray, swear to me by the Lord, since I have showed you kindness, that you will show kindness to my father's house and give me a true token. Please preserve the lives of my father, my mother, my brother, my sisters, and all that they have. Do not kill us. And the men answered her, our life for yours, if you will not tell this discussion to others. And it shall be when the Lord gives us this land that we will deal with you with kindness and truth. She then lets them down from the attic where they're hiding from the people of the village or area, and they come down and they are successful in their mission. Rachav's a really interesting person. Yes, as we said, many commentators claim she was a prostitute, and yet she exhibits more behaviors that are congruent with our instructions from Kiddushin, namely, honor for God, acknowledgement of the guests she is presently housing, and respect for her parents. She knows there are dangers out there, and she even instructs the two scouts how to avoid them and tells them which way to go, which way to travel, mirroring the specific instructions in our Parshat. A most interesting perspective is provided for us in the teachings of Hasidut about what went wrong. This is how we are taught. The Bnei Israel fell in love with the Midbar. The manna fell every day. They were on close proximity to the Mishkan, and everyone was united. It was, simply speaking, a spiritual paradise, without concern for material. They felt that entering Eretz Yisrael would be a step down. It would be a challenge to enter the real world, dealing with conquest, nation building, farming, and it would harm their pristine spirituality. They feared the brutality of conquest. They feared the fruits and the toil and the wasted energy that would go into managing a national agriculture. Wasn't it a diversion from our real national Torah ethos, they thought? To enter a land means to get embroiled in material things, in complicated, messy reality. However, as we know, and we are truly being tested these days, Israel as an entity is extremely important to us. And yes, it's messy. There's national concerns. There's daily concerns. There's concerns about neighbors. All of this is true. Not great for the faint of heart. But we are required to do our part to maintain it. And this is the challenge that continues. Now, in terms of what Chassidut says, this is all well and good. But remember, they were complaining. They wanted the food of Egypt. They didn't want to just stay in the desert. They wanted to go back. They liked the menu better there. The expectations of daily life, not having to think. So according to this more spiritual interpretation, they had come around and gotten used to this way of life and now didn't want it to change. They acclimated. And again, we know that they didn't love the manna so much. So we can, contest that in terms of the Hasidic masters. But the point is, they didn't want life to change. But this was not God's plan. The leaders were to take them through the desert. It was to be a cleansing effect. And then they were to be readied to move on to Eretz Yisrael, to settle it and build community, framing a new model society different from those that they saw, those in Egypt, if you will, and the other kingdoms that they saw along the way. Apparently, except for Caleb and Yoshua, this group of leaders were not well prepared for this upcoming additional transition. There's a question in leadership studies, which is a specific leader made for our time, or is a time made for a leader? It's a philosophical question. It's a rhetorical question, but it's one that we can answer based on certain experiences and certain examples in our lives throughout history. Funny enough, as I watch my husband fixed to the television and radio and 10 different commentators on football games, I notice that there's a defensive as well as an offensive team, each one with different skill sets. Perhaps these leaders, our Parsha's scouts, were appropriate for the traveling team as they went through the desert, but not for the organizing settlement team that would have to take on new challenges. So I wonder, while all the commentators go into overdrive either accusing or justifying the scouts of our Parsha, maybe they just need to settle on the reality of their humanity. We as human beings do the best we can, whether as members of community or as leaders. Further, as mere humans, no one should have unlimited reigns of leadership. This is absolutely clear. There must be a Moshe, a Caleb, a Yehoshua, and so many others to hold each other in check, all doing their part and acknowledging their limitations. Turning inward, if you will, as Moshe did when he perceived God's presence. A most poignant lesson for our world today. Humility, not haughtiness. Awe and kavod, honor, not fear. Shabbat shalom.